Good afternoon, students, and welcome to today's lecture on intercultural competence. I'm your professor, Dr. Rob Steffen, and today we're going to talk a little bit about what it takes to be a good global citizen in the world. Now, in today's rapidly evolving world, the value of intercultural competence has never been more pronounced. As globalization continues to connect individuals and societies and economies, it has become an integral part of our daily lives. Intercultural competence encompasses knowledge and attitudes and skills that allow us to navigate and thrive in a very diverse landscape in which we live. But what is intercultural competence, you ask? Well, simply speaking, intercultural competence refers to the knowledge and the attitudes and the skills that you need to effectively interact and communicate with individuals from diverse backgrounds. Now, you might be thinking, people love me. I'm great at getting along with people from all over the world, all kinds of people. Why do we need a lecture on how to be likable? Well, just look at the world around you. The sheer scale of political and economic and social and religious and military conflict in the world. And that will give you a sense for just how important these intercultural competence skills actually are. And how many people in the world, well, they kind of lack this skill. So don't get caught up thinking that your way is the only way. Journey with me as we investigate intercultural competence. Now, when it comes to intercultural competence, one of the most important ideas is to know who you are and where you come from. That's simple, you say. But just think about how many movies revolve around the idea of somebody not knowing who they are or forgetting their background, right? Think of Star Wars and Luke, I am your father. He had no clue. Or Simba, never forget who you are. I think those are the same voice, actually. Either way, right? Simba forgot who he was. Or think of the Matrix, not knowing whether things are real or fake or who you actually are in the world. All of these revolve around the idea of not knowing who you are and where you come from. Now, sure, these are some fun kind of movie examples here, but it is genuinely important in life to develop an understanding of yourself. And when it comes to intercultural competence, that means knowing your own cultural background, your values, your beliefs, and your biases. This is profoundly important because it is this awareness that allows you to recognize how your own background influences your perceptions and behaviors and interactions with other people. So let me give you an example. Right? There was this great study done by two scholars at the University of California, Berkeley a couple decades ago, Robin Lakoff and John Gumpertz. And they wanted to understand how people talk differently in different parts of the country. Not so much like the accents and that sort of thing, but the general style and the speed of speech. And what they found was that like New Yorkers, it turns out, tend to be very uncomfortable with silence. So you put them in a business meeting, and at the very first pause, they're going to be jumping in with something to say. Midwesterners, however, are much slower to speak. They think that they think through what they're going to say, and in doing so, they might not ever have the chance to actually jump into the conversation because the New Yorker already has. Now, this isn't to say that one option is right and one way of doing things is wrong. But imagine the problems that could arise if these two didn't have an understanding of their own way of speaking. The New Yorker might be thinking, this person is so boring. They won't even speak. They must have no ideas. While the Midwesterner might be thinking, this guy's a jerk. He's dominating the conversation. And neither of them are actually trying to cause problems. They just don't understand their own natural way of doing things. And that can lead to a breakdown in communication. Now this leads us directly into our next facet of intercultural competence skills, communication and listening. Now on the surface, you think this might just have to do with language, right? Go to Greece, you don't understand the difference between a yasas and a spanakopita, and well, it's all Greek to me, right? But seriously though, you should take Greek, it's an awesome language. But my point here is that there's all sorts of differences in the way that people talk that can cause communication problems. We just saw one with the New Yorker and the Midwesterner in the previous segment. Now, Deborah Tannen looks at this issue and highlights differences between how men and women speak, even when the goal is to convey the exact same kind of content. So one big difference she highlights is that men tend to be more direct than women. So they might say, "I think we should get the nachos with the guacamole and the carne asada." Whereas women tend to be more indirect. They might say something like, "Have you thought about the enchiladas at all?" Both people are saying the same thing. "I want the nachos," or "I want the enchiladas." But they're doing so in very different ways. And if you don't recognize that, you could be in real trouble with your wife who wanted the enchiladas if you just get the nachos anyway, even though they were more delicious. Anyway, in another example, Tannen highlights how men tend to give reports, right? Factual information about what they've done in a given day, whereas women tend to try to build rapport, right? Emotional connections through conveying what happened. So a man might say something along the lines of, "That meeting went 45 minutes over, it's scheduled end time, and as a result, I didn't finish my direct report assessments. It was a bad day." Whereas a woman might say, "It was a tough day, and I just felt like I was drowning in paperwork, but it was nice to talk with Marcella." Right? Again, somebody reporting factual information, somebody reporting something a little more qualitative in terms of their experience in order to build emotional connection. Again, both people are saying similar things, but in different ways. And an ignorance of those communication tendencies could cause comprehension problems between individuals or groups. Now, cultural intelligence refers to the capability to adapt and function effectively in diverse cultural contexts. This involves acquiring knowledge about different cultural practices and customs and etiquette, as well as developing the flexibility to adjust behaviors accordingly. Let me give you a few examples from my own life. These are kind of silly, but I think they convey the idea. So, first time I went to Europe, I was 20 years old, about your age. I was in Italy with my little brother. We were heading around to my very first archaeological excavation. And being a poor college student, I was not about to spend a bunch of money I didn't have to, right? I needed that money for wine after all, so I'm not wasting it on anything else. So, we get to this restaurant, and I spend like 15 minutes using my little Italian phrase book, right? Remember, there's no Google Translate at this point, to try to explain to the waiter how I didn't want any of the bottled water that was on the menu. Instead, I wanted tap water, right? I thought water should be free. After all, in America, that's the norm, right? You get tap water when you go to Chipotle. They give you the little cup, you fill it up with water at the machine. It's free. That's the way it should be. Or at least that's what I thought. Now, the wait staff looked at me like I was absolutely nuts. And pretty soon I was like walking back into the kitchen with this like carafe trying to fill my own water from a sink. And they literally thought I was a lunatic. And that was all to save like €1.50. Now, this is a pretty harmless example of me not knowing the cultural norm. And that's that the default in Italy is that you order bottled water, right? Either still, naturale, or sparkling, frizzante, whenever you go to a restaurant. But it wouldn't take a lot to imagine that becoming a far more problematic issue in a more serious scenario. So, understanding the cultural norms of others and getting that they might not be the same as your own, and being able to adapt to the cultural norms of others is really a fundamental part of intercultural competence. Now, the next big part of intercultural competence involves empathy and perspective taking. Now, cultivating empathy involves stepping into the shoes of others, right? Understanding their perspectives and appreciating their experiences. Developing empathy enables us to bridge cultural gaps, build trust, and foster deeper connections. For this one, let's take an example from our own culture. One where, even now, in the 21st century, it's often women who are responsible for parenting, while men focus more on their outside of the house careers. Oh, but also now in the 21st century, women also have those outside of the house careers, but then they still also do most of the child rearing. So imagine a case where, like a mid-level manager, we'll call him not Robert Steffen, we'll call him Stephen Roberts, right? He's getting upset with a project lead, we'll call her Lindsay. Lindsay shows up like 5 to 10 minutes late for every 9 a.m. meeting they have on the schedule. And good old Steve Roberts, the mid-level manager, finds this incredibly annoying and often lets her know about it in front of the rest of the team members to boot. Well, it turns out that if mid-level manager Steve Roberts had a bit of empathy and maybe asked why this was the case instead of just yelling at poor old Linz in front of everyone, he would have found out that the school bus driver had COVID these past couple weeks. So Lindsay had to drive her kids to school herself and drop them off and then drive back across town to her job. And it took everything she had just to get there 7 minutes late. She was doing the best she could. So yeah, practicing empathy here would have been useful to think about what it'd be like to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. To understand that you might not know everything that's going on in someone else's life. And as a result, that something slightly inconveniencing you might not be because that person is a bad person, but rather because you just don't know the whole situation. If you ever want to hear a great version of a story about empathy, listen to David Foster Wallace's This Is Water graduation speech. It is absolutely awesome. Now, inevitably, intercultural interactions can lead to misunderstandings and conflicts. Learning strategies for managing conflicts constructively and addressing cultural differences and finding common ground, these are all crucial to intercultural competence. So yeah, even in the best case scenarios, right, conflicts happen. And learning how to resolve those by thinking about cultural differences is a great skill to have. Let's take the made-up example of Anna and Raj. And they have a make-believe argument about their group project that they have to do for Dr. Rob's absolutely amazing course. We at least know one part of that is true. Now, they just keep butting heads over who's doing what and the timeline of the whole project. And we'll say Anna is from like a Western culture and she's accustomed to kind of strict deadlines that emphasize efficiency. And Raj, on the other hand, is from an Eastern culture and he values flexibility and places kind of a high priority on relationship building. Now, both of these are great things to have on the team. But initially, their conflicting approaches create tension and hinder progress. And it's only by kind of openly talking about why they're doing the things they are, and doing so in an empathetic way, that they can make progress. If Anna says that she values efficiency to meet the professor's expectations, while Raj says that he prioritizes building strong relationships with classmates to ensure long-term success, well, when they have that understanding, they're going to find common ground by agreeing on a kind of flexible timeline that incorporates both efficiency and relationship building, right? They can make both of things work if they communicate and find where both people are coming from. In the end, they just end up asking Dr. Rob for an extension on their project anyway, because he's a pushover and he gives them a week extension, and then they're still going to complain about their grade anyway, because that always happens to good old Dr. Rob, no matter how nice he is. But they do so as a unified team. Such is life as a college professor. Now, at its core, intercultural competence promotes understanding, empathy, and respect for different cultures. It equips us with the ability to effectively communicate, collaborate, and build meaningful relationships across cultural boundaries. By embracing diverse perspectives, we gain fresh insights, creativity, and innovation. And in a globalized economy, intercultural competence is a catalyst for success. It enables individuals and organizations to engage with international markets, to adapt to multicultural workplaces, and to foster inclusive environments. Furthermore, intercultural competence plays a crucial role in diplomacy, conflict resolution, and promoting peaceful coexistence. In essence, intercultural competence is not only a personal and a professional asset, it's an essential tool for fostering a more interconnected, tolerant, and compassionate world. Embracing its value today is vital for shaping a brighter future for all.